exhortation will be provided by Brother Casey Opitz, and his title is Treasure. Casey has asked if we turn up Matthew 13. Matthew 13, we'll read 44 through 46. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, the which when a man has found, he hides, and for joy thereof goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant man seeking goodly pearls, who when he has found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Give our attention to Brother Casey. His topic is treasure.
Morning. The first half of this talk is actually going to be sort of a book review, 3 books that Becky and I have been reading recently, and a recommendation of those books. Second half of my talk will be about treasure, because that's just an example of one of the ways that one of these books has been helping me, an example of the sort of message that these books provide. A lot of us are familiar with the book by Brother John Launchbury called Change Us, Not God. We used it as a guide and a jumping off point for one of our Sunday school classes a number of years ago. The book focuses on the atonement. Heavy subject, but some interesting perspectives. The part I remember most clearly in this book is the section that describes various atonement theories that came into vogue over time, over centuries, and the shortcomings of these various theories. And I've reread portions of this book over the past couple of months to try to better understand the meaning of sacrifices. One of the books we read most recently is called Good Gracious God by Brother John Downer and Sister Sylvia Ospina. To me, this book feels like a companion to Change Us, Not God. It focuses on the complete, undying love that God has for us. And I need that reminder. I tend to all too easily see God's anger and frustration and disappointment and punishment. And I tend to see rules and steps and tasks. But I think that's not necessarily the reality that God would have us see about him and his relationship with us and our relationship with him. The book repeatedly brings us to Exodus 34. It's a touchstone reference for this book. Moses asked to see God's glory, and this is what happened. The Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation. For years, I would see and focus on that last part. I knew there was a problem with it, the way that my brain naturally interprets it, because that's not how God operates. God does not hold children accountable for their parents' sins. But boy, that sure is what that sounds like. have this reference in Ezekiel that says what we truly know and believe about God. And I took this particular case here from the New Living Translation because sometimes it's just good to hear familiar passages differently. Ezekiel 18. The person who sins is the one who will die. The child will not be punished for the parent's sins, and the parent will not be punished for the child's sins. Righteous people will be rewarded for their own righteous behavior, and wicked people will be punished for their own wickedness. But if wicked people turn away from all their sins and begin to obey my decrees and do what is just and right, they will surely live and not die. All their past sins will be forgotten. They will live because of the righteous things they have done. You think that I like to see wicked people die? Says the sovereign Lord. Of course not. I want them to turn from their wicked ways and live. Fathers aren't punished for their children's sins, and children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are not punished for their fathers. So what does God mean when he says, and he does not leave the guilty unpunished? He punishes the children and their children, for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation. Well, this book, Good Gracious God, provided an answer that works for me. Their suggestion is that God waits 3 and 4 generations in his patience and his love for deeply sinful people, to see that the wicked ways that they inherited, for lack of a better term maybe, and then if they continue in those sins, to see that they were harmful and evil, and to repent. If they do not, only then will God act. Now he tells us a bit further on in Ezekiel, as surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of wicked people. I only want them to turn from their wicked ways so they can live. Turn from your wickedness, O people of Israel. Why should you die? And while still a little hard to decipher, I have not found a translation of the Bible that provides a version of Exodus 34 that really states it the way I believe it's meant to be, or the way God operates. The New Living Translation puts the passage this way. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generation. So maybe he's saying, I lay the sins, not the guilt, but the sins on future generations. These sins continue 3, 4 generations. In fact, he punishes the children for continuing in the sins that were started by their parents. In fact, this is exactly what we see God telling Abraham in Genesis 15. The Lord said to Abram, after 4 generations, your descendants will return here to this land from Egypt. For the sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant their destruction. The sins of the Amorites are bad, 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 bad. But in my patience, in my mercy, in my graciousness, I'm going to let it go for another 4 generations. We normally read this as the sins of the Amorites are not yet full. And we may scratch our heads wondering exactly what that means. But if we understand that it's because God is gracious and merciful and would see no one die, then we can grasp what this means. But while I was focused on this perceived negative or challenging thing about God's character in Exodus, I would completely miss or gloss over the first part, the first thing God says about him, the thing he really wants us to know about him, is that he is compassionate and gracious and slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness. In fact, this is what Moses saw when he asked what? He asked to see God's glory. It is God's glory to be compassionate and gracious and abounding in love. That book, Good Gracious God, paints that picture of God's love over and over again, driving the point home, something I need to see, be reminded of. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. How can I miss that? I highly recommend the book, in case you hadn't noticed. But then, as a companion, I also recommend Pictures of Redemption, written by Brother George Booker. Like the previous two books, he makes the point very strongly that our salvation, our atonement with God, is not a matter of steps or procedures or formulas. Rather, God, throughout the scriptures, paints pictures of redemption for us through parables and living parables. Each of these parables brings out a different facet of the greater picture. And we'll get to one of those. And we need to take care not to dig too deeply into each facet, that we blow it up and end up drawing conclusions that are not intended. Just to quote Brother George, he says, "I'm not saying it's wrong to seek out the deeper things of the Spirit of God. Of course it is not. But sometimes, in pursuit of this objective, we split hairs that should not be split. We set one idea against another and concentrate on differences, perceived or otherwise, between brothers or groups of brothers. And in these situations, we come to put too much emphasis on one or more of the basic principles, and consequently less emphasis on other principles of equal importance. In examining every aspect of one tree in the forest, as it were, we may lose sight of another tree, which is equally important. We may even risk losing sight of the forest as a whole." Now, to illustrate this point, we're not going to get into this topic really today. The first topic he deals with regarding our redemption is the language that the Bible uses around us being purchased or redeemed or ransomed, or a price being paid. This language is used some 25 times throughout the New Testament. So we come to the conclusion that there really must be something to it. Surely there must be something transactional in the process of atonement. This is where, as I mentioned earlier, where these erroneous theories have come from, like God is an angry God and could only be satisfied by blood, or that the devil has God over a barrel, forcing his hand, and so he gave his Son. But maybe, just maybe, take this for what it's worth, this language of purchase and price and ransom is all parabolic. And there is no literal transaction taking place. I'm not going to dive into that here this morning. I just brought that up to give a sense of the interesting and helpful topics that the book covers. But I do want to look at an interesting take the book presents on treasure. So there, first half done, second half you can 1 Samuel 25:29, Abigail is speaking to David, heading him off before he does something rash in his anger at Nabal. She says, even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. What a beautiful figure of speech. To be bound securely in God's bundle of the living. The Hebrew word for bundle is a pouch or bag where people without access to banks or safes would keep their precious possessions. Similarly, in Malachi 3, then those who feared the Lord talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name. On the day when I act, says the Lord Almighty, they will be my treasured possession. I will spare them, just as a father has compassion and spares his son who serves him. What a beautiful picture of redemption. To be taken up by the omnipotent Father in the bundle of his special and treasured possessions. To be kept safe and secure through all of our travels and trials until we reach the final destination. Well, now let's turn to Matthew 13. We have these two very short parables that Brad read for us. First, we have in verse 44, treasure hidden in a field. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Well, what could this treasure symbolize? When we read it, we immediately understand that the treasure is insight into God and his plan. It's wisdom, as Paul elaborates in Colossians 2. My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Then, back in Matthew 13, we have this pearl. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. So in the first parable, the man stumbles onto this treasure. For whatever reason, he's digging in a field and he accidentally finds the treasure. He recognizes it for what it's worth. In the second parable, the man has been searching for a special pearl. He searched through all the pearls until he found this one that he knew he was looking for. In both cases, the men go to great extremes to acquire the treasure they've found. That's how it should be with us. Did your life cause you to stumble upon this treasure? Or did you know that this treasure was out there, and did you search for it until you found it? Even those of us born into and raised with this treasure could be said to have stumbled upon it, because we didn't work to find it. Regardless, we have now all found it. But have we, or willing to give all to ensure that it's ours. Now let's take another look at Matthew 13, the whole chapter. In verse 3, we have the start of the parable that we all know so well about the farmer who sows seed. And it lands on all kinds of different soil. Then, in verse 24, we have the parable of the farmer who sows good seed, but his enemy sows weeds in among the intended crop. Jesus starts to explain this second parable in verse 36, and in verse 37 he says, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man." Given that in the second parable, the farmer is the Son of Man, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that the farmer in the first parable is also the Son of Man, the one who sows the seed on all kinds of different soil. Then there's verses 31 and 32, which involves another farmer who I think we can easily see as Jesus as well. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man, a farmer, took and planted in his field. So it's the smallest of all the seeds, yet when it grows, it's the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. And then verse 33 is a little more enigmatic. Called another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman, not a farmer, took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. I say this is enigmatic because I don't think yeast is ever a good thing in the Bible. Just as a quick aside, Harry Whitaker suggests that all of these parables are taking place now. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like, not will be like. In the first parable, he's talking about stony, hard-packed, and weed-filled hearts that can't accept the seed that Jesus sows. In the second, he's talking about weeds the enemy sows in this kingdom. And in this one about yeast, he's talking about corrupting influences that are harming the purity of the faith if we take yeast to have its standard meaning, something not good but corrupting. It's an interesting perspective, and again, you can take it for what you believe it's worth. But given these parables, in which the man is clearly Jesus, the farmer is clearly Jesus, and given that all of these parables are lined up together, could we interpret these two parables about the treasure and the pearl the same way? Could the man who stumbles on or diligently searches for treasure also be Jesus? Could they, these parables, should they be interpreted both ways at the same time, so that the man is Jesus from one angle and he's us from the other? Quoted again from Brother George Booker, whether it is by what appears to be coincidence but is really the providence of God, or by diligent and long searching, Christ will seek out and find his treasures, his pearls. They will be his treasured possessions, the ones who are bound up in his bundle of precious things. We will also be Christ's treasures because we treasure what we have found. What we desire in our heart of hearts is what we will become. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Those who seek after the treasure of God's truth, who desire it above all else, and who will sacrifice everything else to possess it, will in the end become the very treasure which they sought. They will have the treasure of God's word stored in themselves in jars of clay. And they will eagerly anticipate the day when those frail vessels will become incorruptible vessels holding eternal truths. Do we seek Christ? Or does Christ seek us? Surely both are true. Do we find Christ? Or does Christ find us? Again, both. To human eyes with human experience, it may look like we do all the seeking and all the finding. But from God's point of view, we all were known and marked out ahead of time. From his point of view, we do not and we cannot save ourselves. Rather, we are searched for and found and redeemed and treasured, all because of his desire and his will. We are the living pearls.